So welcome to day 2 of the Sustainable Events Summit. I think some of you joined us yesterday morning, so welcome back. And for those who weren't here with us yesterday, I hope you find this morning an interesting session. Certainly yesterday's was. It is an interactive session, so I'm glad to see we've already started to use the chat box. And so if you've got questions throughout the session, please pop your questions into the chat box. If there's a dialogue going, then please come off mute and we'll have a proper conversation. But if you can start by using the chat box, that would be amazing. My name's Susan Duncan. I'm the founder of Secret Spaces and the host of this summit. Secret Spaces is a hand-picked collection of amazing event venues, all of which have something unique about them and provide an amazing backdrop for events, and many of which have sustainable credentials. And it was that realization and my passion for the planet that brought us to the Sustainable Events Summit. And I really wanted to use this week to shine a spotlight on how events can be more sustainably run than perhaps they have been in the past. Today I am joined by 3 event planners, all of whom put sustainability at the centre of what they do when planning an event. Lucy Hall from Lucy Clare Events, Lisa Sweeting from Green Sense Events, and Mary Fothergill-Kemp from MFK Events. So welcome to the 3 of you. They're going to give us insights into what their approach to running events sustainably, give us some top tips. And, you know, as I say, this is meant to be an interactive session, so please ask lots of questions and engage. So with that, I will hand over to Lucy.
Thanks very much, Susan. Morning, everybody. Good to see everyone here. I'm just going to give you a little bit of intro about who I am and what I do. So I'm Lucy Hall, founder of Lucy Clare Events. I founded the company back in October 2016. Before that, I've been in the industry now for about 15 years, and I was working with 3 other agencies. One in Hampshire, one in London, and then one in West Berkshire. Basically, I love the reason why I've been so long in the events industry is I actually just love working and meeting with people from all different walks of life and developing those relationships from which I can create, or we can create, and deliver fabulous and successful events for my clients. I love the variation of my work. I work with a lot of different industries. Obviously, it's a lot of different venues and with a lot of different suppliers, and that's something I really love. And I love bringing and turning people's dreams into a reality. I think that's a big one for all of us event planners. It's just seeing that dream come into life, and it's something that you've been a part of. I work with both corporate and private clients, mainly on the corporate side. Privately, I get involved with milestone birthdays, occasions, and the odd occasional wedding. But more on the corporate side, conferences, team events, all different types of parties. I do venue finding, retreats, both sometimes overseas, but mainly in the UK. And then creating bespoke experiences and different types of clients entertaining. I'm probably kind of a young person to the sustainable events. It's always been there in the background over the last few years, but I think this year it's really come to a fore of my mind and the need for it. I love the environment. I'm a proper country girl, and I care very much about it and the communities we live in. Events consume a huge amount of energy and obviously generate vast amounts of waste, and that obviously has a massive impact on the environments we live in. I want to produce events that reduce the carbon footprint on the environment and therefore ensure that the environment is still around for many years to come. I also love working and supporting with local small businesses, and that is very key to when I'm looking for suppliers to work with. I'm always looking at different ways to reduce the impact on our environment in my events with my clients. It is, as I said, I'm relatively new to doing sustainable events, but it is a gradual process in educating my clients. So bit by bit, I'm finding that I can, drip feed my knowledge and gradual learning into bring them up to bring them into doing sustainable events. So it's very much it's little by little. I'm gradually building that. And what I do is in my proposals, I basically create a few venues of different levels, and one might be completely sustainable, and one is as a normal, and it's just gradually educating them on that. So yes, and yeah, I'm really looking forward to the rest of this session and discussing more and in myself learning more from Mary, Lisa and Susan. Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks, Lucy, that was great. Lisa, over to you.
Okay, good morning everybody. Also nice to see you all here, to see so many of you joining, and as Lucy said, I'm also looking forward to the rest of the week and the rest of this session. So I'm Lisa Sweeting. I run a company called Green Sense Events, and we support organisations with bespoke, creative yet sustainable event solutions, right from kind of concept through to delivery. I've been in the events industry, like Lucy, really, for about 15 years. I started out with an event management company in Bristol, so I'm based in Somerset now. Managing corporate and private events, weddings, annual celebrations, ticketed events, award ceremonies, you name it really. And then I moved into the charity sector, focusing on more kind of mass participation, outdoor sports events, 5Ks, 10Ks, running events, walks, hikes, half marathons, that kind of thing. I love events because I love bringing people together, but I also kind of love how creative you can be with it. The possibilities really are endless, and I love seeing kind of how all your hard work kind of comes together to produce an experience. In terms of sustainability, so I've experienced over the last 15 years how wasteful obviously the events industry is. Most people know that. And I think this was highlighted for me really when I worked in outdoor sports events, mainly for the amount of single-use plastic being disposed of. And actually there are all challenges that we kind of faced with knowing sort of what we could do about it and what solutions were out there. But also things like marketing materials. We used to have a new campaign run every year, which meant kind of new materials printed, again every year and just disposed of. So so that's kind of what's really highlighted it for me, and the need to kind of make change really. And I think it's like someone said to me once, oh, if you want to really protect the planet and be sustainable, then don't hold events. And he's probably right, but I think there'll always be a need to bring people together. And events are vital for business, and as we've seen, especially over the last 6 months, we've had to pivot and move online. But I think that there'll always be a need to hold an event, and it's part of life, as well, to celebrate and connect with others. So I think it's just about making the right choices going forward. So when I made the decision to set up my own events company, I wanted to ensure that I was making the right choices for clients from the very beginning, and it had to be embedded from the start, just not just there as an afterthought, which is why I set up the business. And I think for me, it is about reducing our impact on the planet and protecting our future. And I know that sustainability is not just about being environmentally friendly, but I think for me that is a big part of it. But it's also about investment and profit. And I think ultimately businesses need to kind of see how the choices they make are going to affect their business. and how it's going to save them money and how much their waste will be reduced. And you know, it's kind of not one or the other. It shouldn't be a I'll be sustainable or not. I think we need to realise that actually the two need to be combined, generally in business and obviously in the events industry. You know, I think I'd like to see kind of going forward, I'd like to see actually it's not about choosing a sustainable event, it's actually just about holding an event. And you know, decisions to kind of reduce our impact are embedded into the planning of that event. I hope that the pandemic has highlighted that, you know, that there is a need to come together, but also events can be held virtually, as we're doing today, and actually that will reduce the need for travel. So I think there are definitely virtual events are here to stay, and I'm interested to see kind of how that progresses over the next coming months, really. I think people are looking at different ways to hold events, rather than kind of just coming together and having an event for an event's sake. So that'll be interesting to see. And you know, my kind of hope sort of going forward that big brands will have an impact on other businesses. So you know, you look at brands like Amazon and Google, for example, showcasing their achievements. I'm hoping that kind of other organisations will follow. So yes, that's just a bit about me and kind of my hopes really for the future, and a bit about my background. And again, just want to say thanks for being here. I'm really excited about the discussion to come. And yeah, I'll hand you back. Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa. And Mary?
Thanks, Susan. Morning, everyone. I'm Mary Fothergill-Kemp. I run MFK Events, so eco-conscious agency who specialise in sustainable events. So I've only been in the industry for about 5 years, but I've been done a fair bit with that. So I started off in live events, but now work with private and corporate clients as well. I love the variety that the job brings. So, you know, one day you're working on a live event, live music event on the streets of Camden. The next day you're organising a circus-themed Christmas party for a fintech. I realise no 2 days are the same is a total cliche, but it is completely true. No two events are the same, and I think that is the best thing about being a planner. So I founded MFK in January of this year, so unsurprisingly, haven't had too many clients and events since March, but before starting up on my own, I worked with corporates across a range of briefs, so summer and Christmas parties to AGMs and incentive travel as well. I wanted to focus on specifically sustainable events, because just from seeing firsthand, you know, how much waste was being produced by the events that I was working on, and kind of just how easy it was to actually reduce this and to kind of, you know, not make these choices. If a client's already hiring a planner, then to organise the event for them, then it's, you know, it's just as easy for that planner to make those sustainable choices, you know, on their behalf. So my business model includes a sustainability score. So when creating a proposal for a client, the idea behind this is I will score options. So for example, I'll give them 3 venue options, each scored between 1 and 10. So this will depend on factors such as, you know, energy usage, and, you know, locally sourced produce for their catering, for their food. This score then allows clients to be able to see exactly which areas the venues do well in, which area, you know, which ones are less eco-conscious, and then therefore they're far more aware of their impact by seeing, you know, the numbers on the page kind of thing. So I'm also in talks with a kind of a carbon offsetting partner who I'll have an account with. And the idea is, you know, if you were trying to offset the emissions from one event, sometimes they are so minimal that, you know, it's almost more harmful to try and offset them because you've got to do it in blocks, so to speak. So by me having an account, the client can then offset with me, and then I offset the wider picture for, you know, 5 clients at a time, for example. I think the future of events and sustainability are going to go hand in hand as soon as we're able to start organising gatherings again, you know, face to face. Lockdown, I think, has people the time to stop and consider their personal impact, and I think this is going to directly translate into the corporate world. You know, businesses are having to adapt across the board, and there are more and more regulatory standards that people are kind of having to adhere to. So I think there's a lot of potential for things to improve drastically, and for it to definitely become more at the forefront within the industry.
Thanks, Mary. That was great. And as I said at the beginning, this is intended to be a very interactive session. So please pop any questions that you've got related to anything that you've just heard into the chat box, and I will feed them through. But also we may well ask questions of you, the attendees, as well, to get your opinions, because everybody obviously is connected with the events industry in some way, shape or form. And so, Mary, your last comment there about how sustainability has come to the fore over the last few months, and as people are, I think we touched on this in yesterday's session, you know, we all became aware of the environment around us, particularly during lockdown, when there were no cars on the road and no planes in the air, and just breathing fresher air, people became much more aware of. So do you see that as being a trend that will be more in the consciousness of people when they're looking, when you get client briefs through? Is it something that you will proactively feed back on if you're not seeing in a brief? How are you feeling about that?
Yeah, I mean, even previous to lockdown, I'd have clients, and kind of one of my things was I would quite like to push the sustainability, whether, you know, if it was a focus or not. And people would always be open to the option, open to the discussion. During lockdown, you know, like we just said, people are far more aware of, you know, everyone's seen the new Attenborough documentary. Everyone's kind of very aware of this all going on. At the end of the day, it's people that book events. And I think it's as soon as, you know, the people are sold the idea, and then the thing that gets them, you know, signed on the dotted line is you know, at the end of the day, a cost within the corporate world. And I think more and more with things like the Green Recovery Grants, so I think the government is like 40 million that the government's given to set up these kind of environmentally conscious companies, which just means there's going to be more and more suppliers, there's going to be more and more companies that are dedicated specifically to improving the things that we do, and therefore it's going to become cheaper because there's going to be lots of people doing it. So I think it's definitely going to become more of a thing as soon as as soon as people are suddenly aware that, oh, actually it's really quite easy just to choose a slightly caterer that is more conscious, or, you know, sources food in a more conscious way, and therefore the other caterers that weren't doing so will see, okay, well, they're being booked because they're doing it consciously, maybe I should adapt and change my thing. So I think it's going to be a knock-on effect, and I think it's just going to carry on continuing and growing, really.
And yeah, Lisa, you touched on that, didn't you, that do you want sustainable events just to be events? So it's not about being consciously sustainable, it's just kind of how events evolve.
Yeah, and I think that is sort of how we need to move forward generally in business, you know, about it kind of like not being a choice. It should be something that is just naturally what we do. And, you know, I was chatting to someone recently about kind of, at the moment, you know, business is just concentrating on surviving. And not really thinking, and, you know, how do we get them to think about being sustainable as well? And you know, the response was actually, well, it shouldn't be a choice. If we want to survive, we need to be operating sustainably. We can't keep taking from the planet and expecting, you know, to carry on as we are. And, you know, I think like Mary mentioned about the David Attenborough film that was out recently, and I just hope that everyone sees it because it's so powerful. And I think one thing that struck me was that he said it's not about saving the animals, it's not about saving the planet anymore, it's about saving ourselves. And I think that is something that really resonated, because I thought, you know, it's actually, yeah, if you don't care about animals, fine, but if you care about the future of ourselves and business, then we need to change. And I think what better place, you know, than the events industry to really showcase that.
Yeah, I agree. We've got some questions coming in the chat box, which is great. So Lucy, this is a question from you, from Bex Kelly. Interested to know what the response has been from clients when presented with your different proposals, including different levels of sustainability. Which one do they go with?
Yeah, there's a couple of ones I've been working on at the moment. Is more obviously geared towards the Christmas time, and we're looking at different hampers and everything. and I haven't got anything confirmed as yet, but I've given them an option for the sustainable, working with sustainable supplier, and then another option. And it's really interesting. They are very keen on the sustainable option. Yes, it's that little bit more expensive, but you know, there's so much more to give, and it's lovely, you know, working with sustainable suppliers who will, obviously there's an offset. So, for instance, a chocolate bar, you know, you're going to be planting a tree over in Africa for every chocolate bar bought. And I think that is having, with everything that's happened this year, that is having a huge effect. People are wanting to give back, and I think that's really important. And it's really lovely to see that they are actually considering the sustainability over the cost, because with corporates, the majority, it always comes down to cost. You know, they'll always prefer the cheaper option. But when we can actually provide them with the fact that, yes, you might spend a little bit more, not always, but you know, if you can spend a little bit more, but there's a greater good at the end of it. And I think that's really important, and it's lovely to see that corporates are changing and, you know, looking at that.
Yeah, and I mean, that's another question that's been asked. Is it more expensive being more sustainable? Like from Bex again, is that the case, or is that a perception that people have, and actually does slightly more expensive potentially get offset by the message that it attaches to your brand? As Lisa, you were saying, you know, looking at what some of the bigger corporates are doing, and I imagine anybody that's got a CSR policy today will have sustainability in there somewhere, and so is there an offset?
I mean, I think it's about looking at it differently and looking at more of a reused culture than a throwaway culture. And I think the trouble is with events is that we tend to kind of source items for the event and then dispose of it afterwards. Whereas I think we need to think more about how we can reuse for the longer term, especially if you're holding an event, an annual event year on year. You know, could the carpet that you put down be put away, clean, put away, stored, and reused the following year rather than disposed of? And, you know, could your marketing materials, if you don't print a date on them, could they be used again the following year? It's things like that. So I think actually longer term, you could actually save money by thinking about how you reuse, rather than thinking each time you held an event, sourcing in the items for that particular event each time, which would probably cost you more money.
Yeah, and that reuse message was one of the things that Lucy Agace talked about yesterday, was looking, and the fact that sustainability in the broadest sense is not just about planet, but it's about people and profits as well, because there is an understanding that from a company point of view, profit has to come in there somewhere. But if your business isn't sustainable, so if your business isn't profitable, then it isn't sustainable. So sustainability has quite a broad definition. And so I know, Lisa, you just touched on there about, you know, again, how wasteful events can be. And you gave the example of kind of not printing dates on things. Have you got any other examples of how, because it is those, I mean, we've all done it, you know, I've been at conferences and exhibitions where you get things printed specifically and everybody does it, and you walk out of the hall at the end and you look round at boxes of printed materials that are just going to go straight in a skip because nobody carries them home again, do they?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think there's lots you can do, and it depends on the type of the event, but certainly catering, for example, you know, I mean, the amount of food waste that we dispose of, unfortunately, at events, and I think the key there is to sort of not over order to start with, especially at the moment, you know, where we are having to collect data prior to the event anyway, for track and trace. I think, you know, it's important to then think about actually, you know, clients ordering what they, you know, their choice for catering at that time, making their choice, and then, you know, you're catering for the right number of people and not having that food waste. And then obviously getting away from disposable items, obviously where you can, china and glasses and reusable cups. I know there's nervousness at the moment because of COVID, but you know, I mean, I was in talks recently about kind of the dangers of COVID and the kind of transmission between items, and actually it's much better to be able to wash something up than dispose of it and then potentially be left with what is toxic waste, you know, and then you've got another problem of who handles that waste and how do you dispose of that waste. So you're not then just dealing with waste, you're also dealing with toxic waste. So actually it's much better if you can reuse and wash those items than having waste in the first place. So there's definitely that, but yeah, just thinking about reuse, and try and go paperless if you can. So I mean, QR codes are obviously really popular at the moment. We've seen a massive you know, use of QR codes in restaurants and things, which is actually quite good because it's getting away from printed menus and actually people are ordering online, which again is reducing the need for printed materials. So I think that's quite a good progression.
Yeah, I agree. It's interesting how many things have come out of necessity, been born of necessity out of the somewhat challenging circumstances in which we find ourselves. So there's some interesting comments as well in the box. Nell, thank you, from the Sustainable Restaurant Association. Totally agree about the issue of over ordering. Many caterers we work with say clients' need for abundance is a big problem for waste. They purposefully over order. Does the problem with reuse then become staff time to wash up and storage waste to allow things to be repurposed? Yeah, I mean, that food waste is a massive thing, isn't it? I think everybody thinks that it's food, it's degradable, and so does it really matter? But it absolutely does matter. Mary, is that something that you look at as part of your sustainability scoring? I'm sure everybody would like to know more about kind of how you've developed that and how it will continue to develop, and what value your clients see out of having that. Even if they don't make that choice, at least they understand kind of the premise in which they're making decisions.
Yeah, I mean, well, specifically to the leftover food problem, there are quite a few companies that do on the day collection. So if you host an event or just, you know, corporate, you know, AGM, whatever it is, and if you have a lot of food left over, there are a couple of companies. I mean, I'm based in London myself, so I know there are at least 3 in London, but I know there are other ones UK wide, and you can call them, or you can say, I've got this event coming up, there's likely to be surplus food, and they're kind of on standby to come and collect it, and then they take it to a homeless shelter, or they take it elsewhere to a food bank or charity. So there's quite a few of them. So if there is surplus food, Olio is one of them, OLIO. There are a couple, yeah, I've just seen in the thing, Oxford Waste to Taste. So yeah, you know, there's all sorts of things. With the sustainability score, so I set that up because it was kind of, you know, if I'm trying to make a direct comparison between, you know, 2 venues or 2 caterers or 2 options, it's quite difficult to do so if you can just say, you know, if you've got 5 options, like, well, this one's better than this, but this one's less than this, you know, it's a bit difficult. But to actually nail down the figures of, you know, X amount of emissions is also rather difficult. Things like travel, very easy, because you can say, you know, how many miles, how many people, they're getting the train, they're flying, you know, that one's quite easy to, you know, get a kind of tangible number. With the school, but if you've got a venue and you're basing that on kind of how locally is their food source, their energy consumption, do they recycle, you know, what's their energy policy? If we just put all of those factors into one, then you can just give them kind of a rough score, and therefore clients can see, okay, well, you know, between 1 and 10, which one's better, which one's worse. If you do that for all the different options of the event, then they can then see, okay, well, I've chosen a lot of 8s, maybe I should choose a couple of 2s, you know, just to kind of level things out a little bit, and kind of see the bigger picture of the event.
That's great, thank you. I'm just going back into the chat box because I see we've got some other questions. Michelle, I'd love to hear about the venues that you work with. Do you find those venues that aren't already thinking about sustainability are open to discussing how they can work with you on the event, but also on their practices and supplier changes longer term? Lucy, how do you find venues receptive to conversations around sustainability? I know you and I went together to visit, and I had never quite got the yes to visit Crumplebury, which is above my head, a couple of weeks ago, on a lovely sunny Monday morning, wasn't it? And in fact, Crumplebury is the focus of the session tomorrow, so I won't speak too much specifically about Crumplebury, but certainly as a venue, they've put sustainability at the heart of pretty much everything that they do. How do you find it talking to venues? Are they open to the conversation?
The majority are. Obviously, Crumplebury having been made specifically for sustainability is at its root of the venue, and so everything's covered by them. It's not as if you're discussing anything or suggesting anything that's different to what they do. But on the majority, yes, a lot of even just on the smallest things, because quite a lot of my clients, as I said before, is still an educational process. So even whether it's just talking about using recyclable materials or food composting, etc. Lots of venues are still, they're very open to that if they haven't been doing so before. And it's, as you say, it's quite nice, because if they they don't offer that as a general, it's really nice to be able to, get into conversation about it and hope that, it's definitely something that they're going to carry on. And a venue I used last year, we discussed that, and it's now, is something that they've really looked into for continuing on. So I think, being able to do that and, start, as we've all said, it's that educational and hoping that it's the knock-on effect.
Yeah. So Lisa, do you think that the corporate agenda will drive this with some of the independent venues, and because that's going to be a requirement almost that people will look for in the future?
Yeah, definitely. I think as I say, it's something that people are starting to expect. I mean, I know, when I used to work for a charity, people wanted to see what you were doing, and especially where people are attending an event as a visitor, they want to kind of see what you're doing about it, what are you doing about your single-use plastic, and what is your plan. And I mean, in terms of sports events, for example, so I've taken part in a lot of sports events, and the thing that you see on the side of the road is this, the plastic bottles littering the streets, and there's lots more to it than that goes on behind the scenes, carbon emissions and like I say, printing and all the other things. But what people see is the plastic bottles on the side of the road. And I think all organisations have now got a responsibility to be changing the way they do things. And just sort of thinking about that, I mean, I did a blog recently around kind of sports events specifically, and kind of the London Marathon and what they were doing, and again, I think large organisations especially has got a huge responsibility to be changing the way they do things, and I hope that then has an impact on smaller organisations to follow, and kind of realising that actually, as long as you're kind of making small steps, then it's a step in the right direction. I think what I worry about is that people aren't like talking about it enough, and they're scared about doing the wrong thing or saying the wrong thing or being judged. And I just feel like, as long as you're making one or two small changes, then that is a step in the right direction. So I don't think people need to be overwhelmed by it and thinking, oh my goodness, I need to completely rethink the whole thing. I think it's about just small steps and small changes and building up to it, not being put off really. So yeah, I'd encourage anyone to kind of just start thinking differently, really, and start looking at things that they can do, even if it's just a small thing.
Yeah, and I think, you know, there's one of the aspects, I think one of the other aspects that's come out of the pandemic months has been collaboration across industries and within industries. And so, you know, I think I would say reach out to other people if you're an event planner and you're looking for ideas of how to make an event more sustainable, but it's not, you know, it's not something you've done before, or you're working in a different area or whatever. Right now, everybody is being incredibly supportive, and I hope and pray that that continues. And I would just say, ask. I mean, I'm sure, you know, Lucy, Mary and Lisa would be very happy to come up with ideas and suggestions and companies that they've worked with and so on. But I'm finding LinkedIn a great source of feedback from people, because everybody just wants to help. And so, yeah, even if it's a small thing, getting suggestions of how might I do this differently, because I've done it this way before, but I actually want to be more sustainable. Ask the question. Got a question from, what are the main barriers you come up against when organising an event that is sustainable? Mary?
The main barriers, I suppose, or what I found quite often is the person that you sell the event to is the event planner of a big corporate, or is the PA or the EA or something like that. You make this wonderful plan, this wicked event, and then they turn around to the person who holds the purse strings, and they're like, oh no, it's far too expensive. So I think sometimes it's you've almost got to tailor your brief between it's the same client, but it's almost two different clients that you've kind of got to tweak the pitch to, I think, a little bit. I mean, yeah, cost is often a big thing that comes up as a barrier, and then I think sometimes, you know, you do often sometimes get the clients that are totally not in the sustainability mindset, and they have a very specific brief of what they want to happen and how they want it to look. Excuse me. And they, you know, any other suggestion, they might just be a bit. So I think it's sometimes trying to find something that is very similar to their brief and what they're doing, and kind of lead the horse to water, and kind of get their mind, them thinking in a certain way. And then go from there.
I think it's about the messaging as well, because I think at the end of the day, you know, businesses need to see what impact they're having and how they can use that in their marketing, because it's all about reputation at the end of the day. And kind of, I think the challenge is being really kind of clear as to, you know, if they're going to reduce their waste, if they're going to be using less energy, reducing their carbon emissions, actually what impact does that have, and how can an organisation then use that to be really kind of open and clear to their audience about kind of what they're doing and why they should be doing that. So, you know, I think, and yeah, it goes back to what I was saying before about, you know, people might not, like businesses might not care about animals, for example, but they might care about whether you know, a heat wave next year is going to affect how their business is run, or, you know, if we're gonna have mass flooding from climate change, how is that gonna affect their building? You know, it's things like that actually, if you can point out how it might affect their business, then they might be willing to change. And if they know that they're having a positive impact from changing the way they do things, then I'm sure they'd be much more open to suggestions.
Yeah, and that's a good point, and I suppose goes back to that concept that sustainability isn't just about what we obviously first think of. And I think, you know, you say sustainability and 9 out of 10 people would go planet, and it is definitely about more than just that. And I suppose, listening to what you were just saying there, Lisa, I was also thinking that as an organisation, you want to attract and retain the best talent within your organisation. And actually, if you've got a sustainability credentials as part of your CSR policy and about how you do business, then in my view would be, it would make it easier to attract the right people and to retain those people, particularly amongst the younger generation who are obviously being very environmentally aware in a way that perhaps, you know, we past generations have not been. I mean, Lucy, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I would say yes, it's very much, it is as Mary was saying, I'd say it's very much more of a young person's thing, and as Mary was saying, it's not necessarily the people that you're working with selling the event to, it's the person holding the purse strings that says, you know, is the one that says yay or nay to it. And maybe, you know, this might be a bit general, but the majority of the people that hold the purse strings are those that are slightly older and don't really know or understand about the, you know, the sustainability, and are a bit more closed thinking and, you know, blinded perhaps. And so it's coming back onto that educational thing, and educating people, and, you know, showing, and as Lisa was saying, showing what can be done and how best to serve their businesses in the future. As you know, as we've all said, you might spend a little bit initially, but on the offset of it in the future, it's going to actually be more cost effective.
Sure. There's another comment here about surplus food, but actually looking at food waste, and it's a thing to deal with, and it's much easier, or potentially it seems much easier to chuck it all in the bin and vegetable offcuts. And Jagita, that came from you. I don't know. I know I can't see you anymore. Are you still on? Maybe not. Okay. Oh yes, you are. So from your comment, Jagita, is there kind of, because I know you're a caterer, aren't you? An event caterer. Have you got suggestions for everybody? Perhaps you can come off mute, and if you'd like to, and kind of talk through the approach that you take.
Yes, hello, sorry. Well, we find quite a big challenge, because we deal with different, obviously, venues, like the organisers. We take our catering to different places. So the challenge for us is to find the venues that are looking at how they're dealing just with general waste. Really surprising how many people are still thinking it's all okay just to put one bin out, and it will just, you know, it will disappear. Fairies will take it away. Nobody sees it. So for us, we took the decision, we've been exploring it for quite a while, and we are based in Wiltshire. So we linked up with our refuse collectors, and actually they have a very simple solution for the food waste. So now we're functioning on zero food waste to landfill policy. So, you know, we are only a tiny caterer in comparison to what other people do. But we've taken the decision that it is worth paying that extra money for taking the rubbish away and adding onto your bill. And all we need to do is, we've got our food waste bin just together with all the cardboard recycling and everything else. And it gets collected and it goes into the anaerobic digester. That's it. It's converted into the energy. So, you know, it is, solutions are there. And after having the conversations with the refuse collectors, they say, you know, we've put it across to the council, obviously. We've put it across to other people, but the take up is tiny. And, you know, the added cost to your running business costs is not huge. It's just that it seems to be that, you know, it's extra effort. We send the students, because we run the cookery classes as well, excuse me. So we send, you know, our apprentices, our students to different venues, different restaurants and places like that. And they all come back saying, it is shocking how much goes straight into the bin, because it's extra effort to try and think, oh, what can we do with it? Can we make a stock out of it? And I appreciate not everybody can function on that sort of scale, because if you are, you know, in a massive scale sort of production line, I guess, you know, it's much more complicated than that. But yeah, so that's hence my comment, you know, vegetable offcuts and things like that. It just, you know, the bin turns up, it's gone. Whereas all the when we do, for example, the food that it requires the disposable packaging, and especially now because of COVID and all the rest of it, once again, you know, it's our decision to use only biodegradable packaging. So it can go together with our food waste. So it doesn't even need to be recycled. It goes straight away together with the food waste, and it's dealt with it that way. Obviously, better not to use it at all, and hence my question yesterday about the cling film.
You know, I was going to ask you about that. I didn't know if you were in the session yesterday because that came up.
So, you know, it's the cling film issue. Once again, it's there are options, there are solutions for the domestic market, but if you look into commercial side, as much as you want to reduce it, sometimes it's just not practical not to have anything. And actually, after yesterday's conversation, I've spoken to one of my colleagues who had a conversation about the same issue with the Independent Cookery School Association. And apparently there is a product coming into the market that will be available at the moment just for the catering industry. We haven't had a chance to look into it, but I think it's using fish byproducts.
Oh wow.
And there is, yeah, so there is something coming into the market, but once again, the cost is going to be naturally much higher. So it's a lot about the education. It's a lot about getting more of those things into the market so the cost goes down, and like you say, it becomes a norm. It shouldn't be something extraordinary that, look at us, what we're doing. It should be the norm, but slow progress. Better than nothing.
Exactly. Every small step does make a difference, and I think and Lisa, you touched on this, I think people can feel a bit of overwhelm and think, well, what difference do I make? But if we all took that attitude, then we would be in an even worse position than we already are. We can all make a difference by stopping and thinking, and as you have done, researching and looking for different ways of doing things. And it's actually not quite as difficult as it might seem on the outset if you just lift the lid up a little bit. And I know Crumpleberry went through a very similar process in looking at ways in which to deal with their waste products. And so I'm not going to steal Joe's thunder for tomorrow, but that was something that they looked at really very carefully as well. So, you know, there are solutions out there. It is just a question of doing that bit of research. And as I said earlier, you know, talking to other people who've got sustainability as something that they focus on, so that it does just become the norm. And I think the new product, Michelle has put cling film alternative is in development. It's marinatex.co.uk if anybody wants to look at it. But I imagine it's like anything that comes out, you know, the first new television costs more, doesn't it? But the more people buy it, the cheaper it becomes. And so, and these guys sound like they're first to market, but there'll be other people developing things, and so cost is driven down because there's competition and more people look for it. So, which is a great thing. Michelle, you've made a couple of comments about saying the word sustainability can be a bit ambiguous for clients, and agreeing with Lisa about making it personal and about their business, and you found that's a great way to get client buy-in, and that you feel this year we've got a fantastic opportunity to work with our clients to rebuild their events and businesses in a way that's sustainable and ethical. Michelle, did you want to come off mute and join in the conversation and kind of, because I know you are an event planner yourself, so, and I know you put sustainability at the centre of what you do.
Hi, yeah, sorry, I'm in a room where I have been blinded by the sun, which is why I wasn't on camera. Hi. Yeah, I just feel as I'm really trying to work hard with my clients. So I've been working with my clients to develop their events to be sustainable for five years or so. And mainly I work with couples for weddings, developing sustainable weddings all of my corporate clients have their events are sustainable, and we offset where they can't be. So I work a lot with the University of Oxford, who are really keen to be leading the way in what they're doing. And if they're not able to find a solution and they're not able to put it to their students or spin outs and get a solution, then they'll offset. But in terms of my wedding couples that I work with and the venues and suppliers that I work with, I feel like at the moment there's so much negativity about, you know, what's been happening, and obviously the industry and the situation that we're currently in. And actually, when talking to them and visiting them and keeping our 2 meters distance, everything we're talking about is the positivity that can come out of this, the awareness of the environment that we're in, both on a personal level but on a business level, and what we can do to make sure that coming out of this, getting them new business is essentially based on them being leaders and being at the front of the queue when they can be promoting what they're doing, and they're taking this time, the quiet time, to essentially develop their business, to make sure that they're ready to go and they can be doing everything they could possibly doing to make their clients' events sustainable. And for couples, the same. You know, couples, I feel on a personal level, we all feel the same way. You know, with the Attenborough programme coming out, I think, you know, mainstream, you know, who hasn't watched that, who hasn't shown that to their children? And I just feel like for couples on a personal level, that's something that they can do. And it's something very simple. And the changes that you can make for a wedding are very simple. And it's all about, you know, working with local suppliers that understand that, you know, have minimized their supply chain to be within that 30-mile radius, and just really thinking sensibly about it. And actually, a lot of the time for a wedding specifically, it's not more expensive. It is more affordable. And so I think it's just getting that message out there and just being as positive as we can be to our clients and couples that, you know, it's going to be fine, and we can help you, give you that feel-good factor, but also make sure that you're not damaging the world that we're living in. And actually going further than that, we're actually protecting what you're doing. So I plant a tree for every wedding that I produce, regardless of whether or not we've already offset. So for them, they have a feel-good factor about it as well. So that's what sort of is my personal opinion, but I feel like at the moment, with all the negativity, the best way to get through it and the best way to promote it is just to be super, super positive about it. That doesn't mean we don't come against negative, you know, clients and people all the time. And definitely, I can't remember who said it, but there is a generational split. You know, I see that all the time. But it's about educating people. We educate our young people about it. My daughter cried her eyes out because when she went back to school in June, they gave her a plastic spoon because they've decided they were going to eat on the field and they didn't want the children going backwards and forwards. Absolutely ridiculous. And she cried her eyes out because she basically said, "Mummy, every day I'm killing a turtle." And she's 7. So I think there's, you know, we're educating our children, and that's great, but actually there's a generational problem that we need to solve in, you know, the generations that we're living through. And, you know, we're not going to put a halt on anything if we can't educate all the generations.
No, I agree. Would anybody else like to come off mute and join in the conversation, and comments to make, questions to ask verbally? Please do. Oh, okay. Thank you, Michelle. That was great. Did I see somebody put their hand up? No. Okay. Oh, big. A couple of people have left. And is that a question? From Jessica. I run a promotional merchandise and clothing company with an emphasis on sustainability, and trying so hard to convince my clients to buy less and buy better so that they can reuse. But as you touched upon, the COVID situation has brought up a whole new set of challenges. Things like lanyards that you could leave the date off and reuse for the next event were a great idea, but now the fear of virus spread, people are less likely to go for this. I'm wondering, in your experience, what your biggest obstacles have been with sourcing responsible products, or products at all, during this challenging time. Have you seen a big change in requirements, and how has this been impacted the sustainable merits of your planning? Lisa, you want to have a pick that one up?
I wouldn't say I've got a lot of experience of that, because I haven't really been organising many events during COVID apart from virtual events, so that's quite a difficult one to comment on. But yeah, I mean, it is a challenge in terms of you know, I was talking about earlier about sort of bottled water and things, and especially with outdoor sports events, it has to be a recyclable option. It can't be a reusable option, unfortunately, for that particular type of event, because obviously when you're handing out bottles halfway around a 10K, it's not something that can be reusable. So in that situation, you are looking at a recyclable product. I'm just having another read through the question.
Sorry, it was a bit wordy.
Oh no, it's all right. Oh, hi, Jessica.
Hi, yeah, I should have just said, but I felt like I was getting momentum with clients that could reuse things, but now everybody's kind of afraid of that, and demands and requirements have changed, and I think it has had a bit of an effect on how people are buying for events and buying in general. And I just kind of wondered what the obstacles were and how I could do what I do better, or what I could do to help support.
Lucy, Mary, have you got any other comments you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, like you as well. It is a bit of the fact that obviously not actually hosting any events at the moment. So yeah, experience-wise, it is I'm afraid I'm a bit like Lisa on this one. I mean, I did a wine and cheese tasting online last week. And we made very sure that the boxes that were, you know, the wine and cheese were being sent out in were, you know, was all recyclable materials and everything like that. I say that was my first event, I have to admit, in quite a few months. So yeah, but I'm beginning to work on a conference for next year, an exhibition, and in the process at the moment of chatting with my client of how to, you know, make that as sustainable as possible, because they haven't really thought about that in the past, and it's something that, you know, I've had a chat to them about, and looking at the ways we can, because that obviously there's been a lot of paper, there's been a lot of waste, as Lisa and Mary were saying before, is you know, items left behind as prizes or giveaways. You know, as we said, you know, you get boxes, and
It's appalling, isn't it? Yeah,
it's awful, and it's, you know, not being funny, it's plastic rubbish.
Yeah, no, it is.
Yeah, and so, you know, we are, you know, it's going to be in discussions for the rest of the year is what we can, you know, what their sponsors can offer that's going to be far more, well, greener, and, you know, perhaps, you know, we can go paperless, so that actually offers we, you know, guests can, winners can print out, or, you know, not, or use digitally, so it's not actually lots and lots of, you know, waste from that. But yes, as I'm afraid, as of this year, talking about the here and now, yes, it's very much the more online stuff at the moment.
I definitely think giveaways is a big one, because I know, you know, quite often when you go to certainly expos and that sort of thing, people expect something to take away at the end of it, some sort of goodie bag. But I think there's definitely ways around that. I mean, Lucy, you were just mentioning about kind of, you know, vouchers and things. You kind of do digital sort of, you know, offers and prizes and things, or whether you can do some sort of incentive where, you know, the organisation gives to a charity or does something for good instead of giving away an item. It is quite nice, and again, that's about the kind of messaging and saying, you know, this is what we're doing, so that they can see visually or hear about what's happening, rather than giving them an actual physical item. So yeah,
I think you've got something you wanted to add in here.
Yeah, just, I mean, obviously over the decades I've done loads and loads of these bits and pieces, but recently working on exhibitions, one thing we've been doing, we're a fairly small resource in the centre. We can't start giving tons of advice to all our exhibitors, but there's room for a really strong collaboration here. We work with a small business, and basically they would give their right arm. They do give their right arm. It's a major opportunity for them to have access to our exhibitor list. The brief from us is go talk to the exhibitors and have this conversation. There are alternatives. They've got the ideas. They've got the solutions. It becomes a contra sort of sponsorship, if you like, and it helps us spread the word. It helps us send a good message via a different company, and they have the chance to meet people, and they can spend the time. And obviously, if the advice comes free at that point on that basis to the exhibitor, but if they play their cards right, they obviously end up with a friend and an ongoing client. So win-win for all. And that's how we've found the most effective way of getting that dealt with on the exhibition front.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, now we're now in a situation where we're planning for the future, aren't we? I think every event planner is kind of saying that really there's not much happening at the moment, and what is happening is either completely virtual or hybrid. And I think the consensus tends to be that hybrid is probably here to stay for quite some time, and it's kind of, you know, how do you engage across that virtual world and the in-person world when that can happen again, and using the time to do the research, and, you know, Pete, as you've said, have those conversations, collaborating, getting in the experts, putting sustainability as a conversation piece on the table, and just rethinking, taking the time, getting some focus groups together, maybe with clients and other professionals within the events industry, and going, okay, so lanyards, maybe not so much going forward. What do we think we can do instead? And, you know, lanyards are all well and good, but then they come with those plastic things at the bottom, and it always freaks me out as to what happens with them next. So, you know, let's get creative and imaginative, and I'm not going to come up with your solution right now, because but I think it's possible. And Pete, you've done this before, and I think, Michelle, you touched on talking to Oxford University, and I know here with the Gloucestershire Business Show you worked with the university to create an app environment for the Gloucestershire Business Show. So young people, you know, who are living, breathing and thinking this, engage, see what they can come up with. I know Gloucester University here has an events on the curriculum, so you can go and study to be an event planner. Talk to them and see whether you can't engage with their students and ask them for their ideas, because trust me, they'll have them. So I think it is about that collaboration and connecting. Again, it's back out into a local community, and starting that conversation, and not thinking that we can all solve everything by ourselves, because frankly, I don't think we can. I mean, Mary, I don't know what you think, because you're in London, which puts a different slant on things, and well, you're significantly younger than I am, so, you know, what's your view?
Well, I think on that, when you were, I mean, a while ago, someone said it's a bit ambiguous, the word sustainability, and like you were saying, it's kind of exploring this. But I think if you look at sustainability in the bigger picture, it doesn't necessarily mean kind of offsetting and creating less emissions, stuff like that. Sometimes you could follow kind of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So there's 17 of those. Only one of them is responsible production and consumption. You know, there's 16 other of SDGs that you can kind of follow. So I think going back to, you know, some of these clients that may not be willing to you know, change their brief and stuff like that, you know, if they're not willing to, you know, pay money to offset or something like that, then sometimes you can find a supplier, you can find a partner that may be more attuned to some of the other sustainable development goals, and therefore that is still contributing towards sustainability, but not necessarily in the way that we might think and might consider it. I know before everyone else logged on, when the four of us were chatting, we were saying, you know, people have this image when you say sustainability, people are like, oh, it must be in a field, you know, somewhere in the countryside, and it means everyone's eating vegan food. And, you know, that's not necessarily sustainability. You know, sustainability could be sponsoring a charity for the event that is going to, that's going towards hunger in a third world country, that is still sustainable. It's just in a different aspect. And I think sometimes that might be, if you're struggling to find different ways of making events sustainable, take a big step back and look at that much bigger picture and think, okay, maybe then the client isn't willing to go down this avenue, but there are a lot of other ways that you can explore it, kind of to have an impact with your event.
Yeah, I completely agree. And Lisa, you've touched on reuse, which I think is a strong message, and reuse, hire. Which is a version of reuse, isn't it? And Bex from Taran, I know that's what you guys do, isn't it? And it doesn't have to be new either, secondhand. I know we come up against that kind of COVID stuff, but so long as things have been properly cleaned, then there is no reason not to use secondhand. And actually, if you're dressing a table for an event with secondhand glasses and every table setting looks slightly different, it adds to the event rather than takes away from it. So it doesn't all have to be brand new, does it? A couple of comments. Bex would love to know if there's a central resource to capture all the information that clients and planners can access to run a sustainable event. I do think there's a website being developed at the moment with sustainable resources, so suppliers to the industry. So but I don't know what the name of it is, but I'll find it and share it with you.
So there's the Sustainable Event Alliance, which is, I think Lisa, you introduced me to that one, but they've got kind of it's for planners, and they've got like a big list of suppliers that are kind of attuned to sustainability and people running that way. Another resource that I found really, really useful is Facebook groups. There's a plethora of Facebook groups that if you just type in like sustainability, event sustainability, you'll get like 15 suggestions. Join them. People, like you were saying earlier on, Susan, people are more than willing to help out. People are being incredibly generous, particularly at the moment, because a lot of people, we're all kind of in the same boat. Like no one's massively hectic with lots and lots of clients going on. So people are really, really willing to help out and make suggestions and recommendations and references. So it's, it sounds silly, but Facebook is actually quite a good resource.
Yeah, I found, so I joined up the Event Props for Change Facebook group I'm part of. It's useful. There's always some interesting stuff on there. And also actually, because I've been trying to do a plastic-free month challenge that I started at the end of last month, and obviously planning to kind of incorporate into my personal life. And actually I found, again through Facebook, I think Journey to Zero Waste is a really interesting one. And I think when you start doing these things, you suddenly realize how much is out there and how many other like-minded people there are out there. And I went on there and the other day, and there's literally daily posts of people saying, I've got this item that I need to get rid of, or what can I do with it, or what can I use instead, and that's just kind of in day-to-day personal life. But it's really interesting the kind of the suggestions and things that people come up with. So yeah, it's there's definitely quite a bit out there.
Excellent. And Bex from Taran Productions, for one-day short conferences, there are seed bomb wristbands that can be printed and branded, as well as planted after use, something like that. No good if you want scannable codes or names, but a nice idea for smaller events. Jessica, I love the seeded options. Yeah, that's a really nice idea. So there are creative ways of overcoming things, and it is just about kind of exploring what the options and opportunities might be. And I think everybody, let's be honest, we've all been to and run and organised any number of events where they all look and feel pretty much the same, and you turn up and you get your lanyard and you walk around with your brochure. And wouldn't it be lovely when we can all go to events again if it looks completely different? Rather than trying to make it look how it looked before, use it as a time to be completely creative and make it not look like it looked before. So yeah, I think that's a lovely suggestion.
I'm really interested in the sort of the tech that we mentioned earlier. Definitely about kind of incorporating the use of apps into an event, because I've seen a bit of this across the pond, where kind of apps are being used more and more for agendas and check-in. And that kind of thing, which is great, because then you don't have to again print an item or even have a reception or boards with agendas on and that kind of thing. So it is interesting to see how that is going to be incorporated more and more into events, and actually that kind of reduces those touch points when we're talking about COVID. And you just highlighted, because when you mentioned then about Susan about brochures, and I thought, oh, actually, if you're utilising an app, it's your own personal device, and you can use that as you want without having to give out a printed item. So yeah, I think that's an interesting one going forward.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Pete, I don't know if you want to jump in here, but the app that the students at the university here produced for the Gloucestershire Business Show was actually a VR version of the floor of the show, wasn't it?
Yeah, I'd fire a huge note of caution around that. I think what we did with the University of Gloucestershire was great, and it was a collaborative initiative. It was for the benefit of the students as much as it was us. Yes, you're quite right. They produced a 3D virtual reality app for the show floor, but you could also put it up on screens and things. But in their little exhibition area, they put someone on a pair of VR goggles and wandered them around the exhibition, sat there in front of them, and bumped into everyone and everything as they went. So it was all very amusing. The upside is obviously novelty and a bit of PR and marketing, a bit of social media, and isn't this cute, and some nice 3D shots. The downside is you're dealing with students and everything that goes with that. And I don't know how many of you have had that little experience, but it comes, you guys sitting on this call are trying to run sustainable long-term planned businesses, and you need to be dealing with professionals to deliver a robust product. And if you're not doing that, that's okay. Sometimes there is a place where we're all about collaboration. Those of you who know how we operate, know that we work on a collaborative basis, even with our close partners. But we always have to start with a very clear understanding of who's doing what, and that they're professionals. We've lost both our live location shows for the moment, the South Gloucester and Gloucester Business Show. But accidentally in June, we created an online version, which sort of filled a hole in June and did a little more than that. We did it because we had content ready to go, so we put up some live stream and went down. Well, we've suddenly got an international business on our hands, and we've got the first version of the proper rollout going on in a few weeks' time. And I think Lisa there's going to be on the ground in the live stream venue, kind of making it roll for us. And we're putting that together now. And a lot of that is done, on sponsored collaborations, but it's with professional businesses. I'm wary about the app game. I think there are good times to do it. But I've spent 35 years working in the music and live events industry, as specifically early days, lighting, production and touring in the music industry. That industry floats on a bed of hype. And the job of a production manager in that role, which broadly is what you guys are in the event planning perspective, is to cut through the crap and get to the real job that has to be done. That's a bit harsh, and it's but it is what it is. And anyone looking at an app, I would say, just stop for a second and say, am I doing this because it's a nice gimmick, or am I doing it because it's really going to add value and efficiency to what's going on? And will it be robust, and will it roll out smoothly and not create a ton of energy time, but save a ton of time?
You should see in the spreadsheet now the amount gross and net.
I think we've got somebody that's not on mute.
If the answers to all those are yes, then of course do it. It's great. That's a very efficient way forward. And we're just putting a virtual exhibition together using lots of sort of different capabilities than the normal concept you'd be thinking of if you look at all the virtual exhibition apps that are being flying around like headless chickens at the moment, because they're expensive and people are capitalizing on novelty and people wanting to do things. And actually, true innovation starts with actually starting at the origination of a situation and going, well, hang on a minute, what do I need to achieve here and what's going to work? And if you follow that path, you'll usually find a way that's sustainable, both in the sense we're talking about here, but business sustainability as well. They go hand in hand. I'll shut up at that point, Sarah. Susan.
I guess at least your point that there is potentially application for tech-based solutions to remove touch points within an event environment. And I you know, just as everything has gone virtual and online, I think there'll be people out there thinking of gaps in the market for tech solutions for various things. I've got a comment here. Music festivals have started to roll this out with the Sustainable Mind, Boomtown, Glastonbury and WOMAD. For all three have apps to program your time there with maps and events. Confex also had an app for the physical event. So they are already out there. And yeah, I mean, obviously, if you're going to rely on an app, then you need to make sure that it's been developed robustly and therefore sustainably. But there's lots of brilliant minds out there that I'm sure can help. It's 11:15. Oh, sorry, one more comment. This was great at Convex for booking one-on-ones with people you wanted to meet, which is great because often at these types of events you struggle to kind of connect with the person that you actually wanted to see. So that's a great application for an app, if you pardon the pun. Are there any, as we start to kind of think about wrapping up, Lucy, would you like to kind of make a couple of closing comments, and I'll move through Lisa and Mary to do the same. And if there's any last questions or comments, then please put them into the chat box.
No, I'd just like to say thank you for having me here. I've learned a lot actually, just with this conversation, and there's quite a few points that I will be taking back and exploring more with, and it's been great having Mary and Lisa to actually hear their views as well, and points of learning from them as well. So thank you ever so much. It's been a really lovely morning.
Good, thank you. And Lisa?
Yeah, I just want to say, just going back to, I think it was Vex's point earlier about kind of collaboration, and I think now is like a real key time for collaborating. And I'm always open to chatting to people or hearing from anyone about any ideas people have got, or kind of bounce off each other. I think with this time that we've got, where there aren't so many events happening and people are willing to kind of network and collaborate, I think it's a really good time to be doing that, and then kind of being really ready to change the way we do things going forward. So I'd just like to say, if anyone here wants to kind of chat going forward, then always happy to do so. And yeah, also just thanks very much for having me, and really lovely to chat with you all, and Lucy and Mary for being part of it as well, and just thanks for the opportunity.
Okay, thank you. And Mary?
Yeah, I suppose I just echoing Lisa, definitely always up for a chat, or a coffee if anyone's in town, a social distance coffee. Yeah, no, everyone is more than willing to jump on, and if anyone wants any introductions, then yeah, definitely more than happy to. And I guess also I think everyone's kind of in the same boat, but more of a chins up, like I think it's a tough time at the moment, but I think it is definitely going to get better. I've had a couple of briefs that have been for really, really great events, but we just don't have a time frame on them. So people are wanting it to all happen, it will pick up and it will get there eventually. We've just got a couple of months left still. So yeah, chins up everyone, but thanks very much for having me, Susan, and lovely to meet everyone.
Yeah, well, thank you to the three of you, and to those members of the audience, as it were, who joined in as well and added to the conversation. And that was always the intention for this session. And Michelle, thank you. You've put great conversation together. We can educate our clients to build a sustainable future, and I think that is a very true and apt statement. Bex, Susan, would be great to make this a Facebook group to chat and share ideas. Absolutely, I'm happy to do that. So I'll take that away as an action, and I've got everybody's email addresses obviously from registering, and so I'll reach out to you. We'll need to connect, and I'll set up the group. Happy to do that. And I think, for me, collaboration is a key part of sustainability. That working together, not competing. collaboration, not competition, is definitely the way to go. Events in person will absolutely come back, and now is the time to embed all of the things that we've talked about today, so that when those briefs, Mary, that you've got can actually be turned into a reality in the future, you know, that sustainability box has been ticked as many times as it can be. So, and you know, if we're looking for positives to come out of this time, then perhaps that is exactly it, that, you know, sustainability is front and foremost in everybody's minds. Another little comment, thanks for the conversation. This is from Suzanne, very early here in the US. Oh wow, Suzanne, thank you for joining us. Yes, very early. Also echo the Sustainable Event Alliance active Slack channel for collaboration. So if people use Slack, then obviously that's a good way to go. But thank you all so much for joining. Thanks, Bob, for joining as well. I hope to see some of you over the rest of the week. We're 10 o'clock tomorrow morning with Joe Evans from Crumpleberry, which I think as an event venue is a great example of implementing sustainability, not just in the obvious ways, but across the whole of the business. And it's very central to the ethos for Crumpleberry. So I hope to see some of you on that session tomorrow. But in the meantime, thank you so much for joining today. I hope you've taken some great ideas and suggestions away, and watch out for the Facebook group. Thank you.
Cheers, Susan. See you later.
Thanks very much.